Geoffrey Habron, and I'm an associate professor here at Michigan State University. And I have a joint appointment in fisheries and wildlife and sociology. So 75% in fisheries and wildlife, 25% in sociology. And for the last 3 years, I've been director of the undergraduate sustainability specialization. And then I also hold an appointment with MSU Extension, so that's the land grant arm of the university that looks at issues across the state of Michigan.
What inspires you about sociology?
Well, what inspires me actually is reflected by my appointment. So because I'm predominantly in fisheries and wildlife, that tells you about my background. So I came at this from wanting to be inspired by Jacques Cousteau, actually. So my passion was the environment and the oceans. And at the same time of being passionate about the environment, I was also interested in social issues. So I tell students my heroes were this Jacques Cousteau marine biology guy and then Martin Luther King, who's a civil rights guy. So how do you make those things come together? For me, they were in my head, but you pick what your passion is for your job. So I picked biology, but at the same time, there was always this issues of social justice that was in there, and I didn't know how to reconcile them. And the first time I realized you could reconcile them was when I joined the Peace Corps. And so that's when I realized, I really do care about the environment, but I do care about people. How do you find a way to make those things come together? So it wasn't until I got to my PhD where I was able to put those two things together. And so from the sociology side, it's really understanding how society operates and what explains relationships. So if I care about the environment and I'm concerned that the environment is harmed and people are impacting the environment, well then you better understand how people work so that you can protect the environment. As opposed to other colleagues who are maybe driven by the social side always, I was driven by the environmental side and was brought into the social side because of my passion about the environment. But at the same time, like I said, I was driven by this interest in civil rights and social justice, but I just kind of thought that's a side thing. You have your occupation and then there are these other things and you don't make them come together. But when I realized, wow, you can bring those things together, for me that was like awesome, because now I don't have to have these conflicting things in my head.
What is one thing about sociology that you think is widely misunderstood or understated?
I think it's clear the issues of structure, the role of structure, and I think in a classroom that's what students typically have a hard time understanding. I think they believe that, or in general society believes that individuals make a difference, which they do. I just mentioned Martin Luther King as somebody who I think did some really great work. But there's limits to what individuals can do, and again, you can look at social movements like civil rights and say, yeah, I can believe that there should be change. You can give me the information, I can make change, but I'm limited by the constraints around me. And sociology helps explain those constraints. So whether they're socioeconomic, whether they're bureaucratic, they limit what we can do. They also provide opportunities to what we can do. But I think a lot of students feel like, wow, if I want to be president, I can do it. If I want to go to school, everybody should be able to go to school. I think if somebody wants a job and go into this field, they can do it. I think and it's true to some extent, but people have a hard time recognizing that, what, the fact of the matter is, if your parents don't have an education, you're less likely to get an education than somebody who has. And does that mean that universities or other people discriminate against you? No, but that's just the opportunities that are available to you, and I think students have a difficult time of accepting that because they can say, well, I'm the first person I did it, so then everybody should be able to do it. Or if there's such an issue with race, then how come you're a professor? So clearly that's not an issue, and it's like, well, yes, I made it, but it doesn't mean that as a whole blacks don't have a lower likelihood of going to higher education or becoming a faculty member or things like that. Or in our field, we talk about environmental justice, and students have a hard time accepting that too because they look for, well, that company's not racist, or those people aren't prejudiced. It's like, well, that doesn't mean that environmental injustice doesn't happen just because somebody's not overtly trying to harm other people. But fact of the matter is the consequences of their actions have disproportionate impacts on certain groups of people. And so I think students have a difficult time with that, and I think society also has a difficult time with understanding that, because people feel that there's such a strong sense of individual choice and agency that probably comes from being the country that we are, that if you have your mind made up to do something, you can do it, and so be it.
Which of the social theorists do you identify with the most, and why?
Jürgen Habermas talking about communicative action has been a really important concept for me to think about and work with, because it comes up so often in terms of claims that people make about the environment, how they use language and how we use language in dialogue and formulate discourse around things. So we're looking for the easy answer, and the answer is yes or no, or what does it mean to be green? And so we accept those things without thought process, or we throw them out because we say, well, nobody can come to an agreement on what sustainability means or what being green is, so therefore let's not even use the term. So both of those, I think, are insufficient. That the claims that we make about what does it mean to care about the environment or to protect the environment or be sustainable, I think it's an important thing that we have communication and we discuss things and we try to be somewhat rational about them. And I know some of the criticism on Habermas is that, oh, it's too logical and rational, and it doesn't recognize that there are different people come to the table with different power, positions of power, and it's like, yes, that's true, but notwithstanding, it doesn't mean that we can't talk about issues and try to resolve them and to let people feel comfortable sharing their concerns and their needs and their issues. And I think in society today, that's my biggest frustration. When you go to politics, well, you can argue that explains lots of things all by itself, but I'm not satisfied by that. And so, like I said, whether we're talking about sustainability and what it is for a company to be green, or actions to be sustainable at the individual level, at the community level, at the corporate level, people want to just say that's the way it is and let's move on. And we're not going to have conversations about, well, how green is it? Is that sufficiently sustainable? And I think Habermas would say, in order for us to really be a society that's making progress, that we make space to have those conversations. And it's okay for us to disagree, but if we're working towards mutual understanding, that's the point. So on the one hand, everyone wants everyone to come to consensus, but we lose something in that process. And then on the flip side, if everybody is just trying to forward their own interests, what's the point of that? I'm trying to win, you're trying to win. I mean, look at the society that we have. So I think that does explain some of the conditions that we have, that people aren't willing to say, I do have an interest, I do have a concern, and I want to get those out there. But you also have interests and concerns, and you should be able to get them out there. And if I'm worried about the win-loss, then we're not going to be able to make progress on it. But everybody's got to feel comfortable bringing their issues and concerns to the table, and we have to find space to discuss those and play them. And eventually, you might say, our understanding, somebody's going to win or lose, because enough people, we're going to have enough discussion to come down and say, okay, that's what we believe, or an educational system should look like that, or this is how we ought to protect the environment. But as long as we get those interests to the table, that's important, and get voices heard and have discussions. So both in the environmental sustainability world, that really becomes important, but also in society is a larger issue. I think Habermas, to me, I think we should spend more attention on that, recognizing that all theories, concepts have faults to them, that I'm really passionate about deliberative democracy and dialogue.